Good morning, everyone. Today, the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee will review the current economic and fiscal conditions as they relate to the capital budget spending affordability guidelines. Based on today's review, the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee will make a recommendation to the Council whether to retain the adopted guidelines or revise them because the conditions have significantly changed. As noted in the Council staff report, and for those listening at home, today's review of conditions is not about the amount of need in our capital budget, but it's about affordability. Has the county's economic or fiscal conditions changed enough to revise the adopted guidelines? I acknowledge that there's great need in our county, both for important infrastructure and for critical programs and services. However, the Council is also responsible for managing the county's fiscal policies to ensure that the county remains in strong fiscal standing. Carefully managing the county's debt expenditures is an important tool to ensure the county's operating budget has enough resources to address our residents' needs. We can all agree that this is an important goal, as illustrated by challenges like the current COVID-19 pandemic. The Council adopted the current guidelines in October of last year. That's just 3 months ago. During that discussion, the committee reinforced the decisions of previous councils to taper the county's borrowing guidelines. As noted in the staff report, the decision to hold firm with an approach to taper the guidelines is having a positive impact on our debt indicators. It is also clear that more time is needed to reach our policy thresholds. There's also been positive news from our federal and state partners. The state has a significant budget surplus. The counties are waiting to see how the General Assembly will direct these unexpected resources. President Biden also signed the infrastructure bill last year, and these resources will benefit our states and counties for years to come. These are important developments, and it will be very important as well to consider them as the county's current conditions improve or not, and as the committee reviews these guidelines. Unless my colleagues have comments to make, I would like to turn it over to Jean Smith, who is our legislative analyst and has prepared, as always, a really wonderful packet. So colleagues, any comments before we get started? Okay, Mr. Smith.
Thanks, Chair Navarro. Also, I'm joined by our county partners at OMB and Finance and from Parks today, as usual, when we review the borrowing guidelines, and appreciate their partnership and all of the work we do, not only during the guideline, but also throughout the year. So as you noted, we'll review the economic and fiscal conditions today. The committee has two kind of sets of recommendations it needs to make to the full council. Related to the general obligation bond guidelines, as well as to the park bond guidelines. In addition, as usual, in the January review, council staff has pulled out all the other information from the executive's recommended CIP. Certainly when we go through that section, there are no recommendations the committee needs to make. It's mostly an FYI. But nonetheless, we can pause at each point when there's a decision or when the committee might want to have to make comments. So I'll quickly go through some of the background for those who might be new to the guideline process, which is none of you, but for those that might be listening at home. So the council sets 6 borrowing guidelines every 2 years, 3 for general obligation bonds and 3 for park bonds. The council considers economic and fiscal conditions when it does this. Our debt capacity indicators is the primary way that we incorporate those conditions into our analysis. And as you noted, there are policy thresholds that the county uses to determine whether we're in alignment or not in alignment. And those are listed on table 1 on page 2 of my staff report for those that want to know what the policy thresholds are for each of the indicators. So as you noted in September, the council or the Geo Committee considered the current conditions and recommended continuing to taper the overall borrowing guidelines for the county's general obligation bonds. The council supported that recommendation. And so those are the guidelines that were set. And then today we'll look and see how the conditions have changed, and certainly the committee can recommend a different course of action if they believe the conditions have changed enough, whether positive or negative, There are some limits in law of how much may be permitted in terms of changing the guidelines, and we can discuss those if we get there. But ultimately, the guidelines the council adopts the first Tuesday of February become the supermajority threshold for the capital budget in May. It does not restrict any decisions the council will make through the budget process. It just sets the supermajority threshold. So let's go ahead and move on to the recommended CIP. On January 18th, Mr. Elrich submitted his or transmitted his recommended CIP for fiscal 23 capital budget and the fiscal 23 to 28 CIP. Overall, he has recommended an increase of $740 million in expenditures and resources, and as noted in the staff report, a lot of this is for federal aid and state aid assumptions, and we will look at those later, as well as some increases to our recordation and impact taxes. The executive also recommended increasing the general obligation bond guideline by $70 million, the aggregate guideline, I should say, the 6-year one by $70 million more than what the council approved in September or October of 2021. He did not recommend any changes to the first two guidelines, the fiscal 23 guideline and the fiscal 24 guideline for general obligation bonds. Executive staff update the economic assumptions we use in our debt capacity indicators periodically. For this review, as noted in the staff report, the only assumption that changed was the county government revenue estimates. And this was done based on the revenue estimating group's update in December, which showed that the county's overall revenues have increased compared to the last estimate for fiscal 22 and beyond. Other economic data will be included in the March recommended budget. But other than that, the other denominators in our debt capacity indicators did not change for this analysis. So council staff asked OMB to create to give three debt scenarios just for review today. The one includes the council approved guidelines from October of 2021. The second one is the executive recommended guidelines from his January recommended CIP this year. And then an illustrative example of keeping bonds at $300 million a year as just an example to see kind of where that shakes out compared to the other two scenarios. As noted in the staff report, overall, there's very little difference between the three scenarios in the first few fiscal years, which makes sense because there is very little difference in total debt. And then certainly as the years progress, the indicators worsen with more debt and improve with less debt. And so overall, the council approved guideline continues to perform better, even though marginally in the later years compared to the executive's recommended guidelines. And as always, the change in assumptions, especially for the general fund revenues that was updated for this review, drives the annual change more than any of the other debt scenarios, because we're only having differences around the margins in all of these debt scenarios. There's no debt scenario that's significantly different than the others. And overall, none of the debt scenarios achieve meeting the policy thresholds for most or all of the indicators we have. Certainly some of them show improvement, especially for, say, the debt to assessed value definitely gets close to the policy thresholds in the later years. But none of them, especially for the debt service to general fund revenues, which is one we track significantly because it gives us a sense of overall fixed cost within the operating budget, it still remains above 11% when the policy threshold is for 10%, and that's for all three scenarios. And so given the review of these conditions, kind of where the council has been going, and as noted in the staff report, council staff's recommendation to the Geo Committee is to retain the existing guidelines for at least another year. The council will come back to this and review it again in January of 2023. And as noted, I mean, there is improvement. There's more improvement that is needed, though, based on this review. And then certainly, at least in the first two fiscal years, there is no difference between the council approved guidelines and the executive recommended guidelines. And so at least in the most constrained years of the CIP, there is no difference between those two options. And then, as noted by the Chair Navarro, there's a lot of new information that we'll get this year, especially related to state aid potentially, and also getting more information in terms of the federal infrastructure bill. And certainly this will provide more clarity to the resources needed in the outer years, which is where the executive's recommendation changes or diverges from the council's approved guidelines. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And as I said earlier, our executive staff partners are here, but I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Navarro, for the recommendation on the general obligation bonds.
Thank you so much, Mr. Smith, for that summary of the packet and the points that that are salient, also what the committee needs to address. Ms. Beck. I think you're muted, Ms. Beck.
Okay, thank you. I did want to just share something on my screen. The reason I felt comfortable coming to you with a slight increase compared to what council had approved had to do with basically the fact that with the guidelines that council approved, with the revenue assumptions that were in place, and this is in your book, you can see, it's hard for me to show it on this. You can see that the amounts that were approved by council back in October are above where we are with the executive now because of the revenue improvements. Jean is absolutely correct. If you stay with where council approved, these ratios are even better. But I did want to just point out that we were still sort of ending up about where you all had thought we would be in October with the CE's recommended guidelines, and it didn't go above that in part because of that issue. So I did want to just bring that to your attention.
Thank you so much, Ms. Beck. Thank you for sharing that. Any comments from my colleagues or questions? I would just share that, of course, we do have to go through this exercise every single year. And of course, there is an opportunity for actually the next council in January to take a look at this, particularly for the outer years. And, I have embedded in my brain comments that Dr. Orland and Ms. Beck shared with us repeatedly in the past regarding, the difficulties that we're facing in terms of the debt service and how hard it was going to be to turn things around. And I so much, appreciated that because it was very difficult, given what, again, we constantly do, which is think about the need. And I'll be honest, I think that especially given this pandemic, right, that, we thought we were going to be dealing with like a 2 to 3 month challenge back in March of 2020. And here we are. We still are not quite sure how the story ends. And to me, it is so critical that we understand the fact that this uncertainty might mean that everything gets better, or we might find ourselves in a yo-yo situation facing a lot of different challenges. And so that's what gives me a little bit of pause to, be a little bit more generous. I think that, again, because of the factors that Mr. Smith mentioned regarding, the state numbers, some of the decisions that were made in the federal level with the infrastructure bill, and I will also want to, say that obviously we know that the state numbers are good because of a lot of the federal relief funds that came through. So we also have to be careful with that. But given all of this, and given that in January of 2023, there will be a new council. I think I think I counted correctly, there will be majority, I think. The majority of the council will be new. That is very significant because I strongly believe that, this council will be faced with extraordinarily difficult decisions. And so sending a message that, we've all kind of decided to hold hands and hang tight, I think it's important. And once again, if in January the conditions have changed dramatically, or at least a little more, then there's that opportunity. And so that's why I personally think that we should just affirm our October decision. And then, again, the council will have that opportunity in January and we can assess. But I do appreciate your observations, Ms. Beck, as well. So that's just my general thoughts in terms of where we are and where we should go. Councilmember Friedson and Councilmember Katz.
Thank you. I at a high level, I agree with you, and I appreciate all the work that was done before I got here as a new council member. I think if the decisions hadn't been made in prior councils after the Great Recession, the decisions that we would have had to make would have been probably impossible, and if not impossible, then certainly much more difficult than they were. Certainly buttressed by federal support, which likely would have made our decisions impossible as well. But certainly those foundational decisions of the circumstances with which we handled the budget, and particularly the capital budget, really put us in a much stronger position. So, leave the house as you found it, as my mother used to tell me. That viewpoint, I think is important, and I have benefited from that as a new council member. And to your point, I think that we ought to go out of our way to make sure that all future councils feel that same way, that they don't feel like they're picking up a boulder that's being dropped on them from a fiscal standpoint. I did have a few specific questions that comes. I don't know if now is the right time, Madam Chair, or if we should wait until specific decision points, but I do agree with you. I am happy to support the council staff recommendation. I do just have a few questions, but I'm happy to yield to Councilmember Katz and then ask those questions after, if that's more appropriate.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. And I love the reference of leaving the house, how you found it. I'll make sure to remind my adult daughters as they're moving out after this pandemic soon. I will say, and Councilor Friedson said something very interesting. I'll write it up or something like that. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you. I'm writing all these philosophies down. I'm a philosophy guy. Thank you. First off, thank you to Gene Smith and to all the other partners for really working on this. This is, I'm somebody who's been afraid of debt my whole life. Being raised in a small business, I was taught the first thing that you learn is that not every dime that comes in to your register is profit, and that not every dime that's in your register should you spend. There's going to be times that you really are going to need those dimes for other purposes, some of which is inventory. But anyhow, I think that our staff is spot on. I think, and well said by both you, Council Chair, and Councilmember Friedson. I think that we should be doing just what we're doing. When I first got on the council, and the council chair was there as well, and the chair of Go at that point. I realized, and as we all did, that our debt was going to engulf us. And, I ran on the idea that if debt were a department, it would be the third largest department in Montgomery County. And that is a scary, and not to say, I have learned along the way that there's things that you need for debt, and you can't not have it at some point, but you have to have it and you have to respect it. And I think what is being suggested here, it shows once again that we're respecting what we're doing. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Katz. All right, so Councilmember Friedson, you said you had some questions?
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, more of a comment. I appreciate, Ms. Beck, the point which is really important about the debt ratios and how the circumstances have changed, some of which were decisions that were made, not necessarily financial circumstances and economic conditions, but decisions to include state aid and federal aid and some other dynamics. Some of them were actual conditions like recordation taxes and others, which we're all happy about, are doing better than what we had originally anticipated. And perhaps we were a little bit more conservative, which is a good thing. This is how it's supposed to work. Be more conservative in impact taxes and other dynamics. And then you have good decisions to make, like the one we're making today. Should we push it a little bit more? Should we stay the course? And that's a really healthy conversation that we're having. So I think the system is working. I wanted to start with that. But I did just want to note that even though the conditions, as you stated, are the same, they're still above the target. And so
yes,
they were above the target in the fall. They'll continue to be above the target regardless of the decision that we make. And the question is marginally, from a large budget standpoint, marginally, how far above the target are we comfortable being as we try to taper this thing down? And, I just, think that context on both sides is really important. So I just wanted to make, that broad point. But I did want to ask the question specifically about those assumptions that were made. If you could just explain, a little bit. We are changing in this proposal, how we're assuming state aid to a certain degree. We're assuming more. There were significant decisions related to that. And so if you could just share with us, the thought process on that, and whether or not this is a singular moment of a change in what we're assuming because there's a lot of state aid coming online, or whether this is seen as a long-term policy decision that we ought to be assuming a greater level of state aid based on historical data.
Right. So I think that there's a combination of factors going on here. I think if I start by talking about some of the BRT projects, I think all along the county executive has said, we can't afford to build this all on our own. We are going to need other people's money. And so in the BRT projects that we have moving forward related to 355 and Deers Mill Road, we have a combination of new revenue sources. We are assuming 50% federal aid in those projects. These are identified previously existing programs that we have been gearing towards being eligible to apply for in the federal government. I think it's new starts and small starts. And again, this is independent of infrastructure bills or more money from the federal government. However, to the extent more money is flowing into these programs, it makes it easier for us to compete. We feel like we have very good projects, and that is something that we are looking to take advantage of. The other thing on BRT is that we are assuming about $200 million, about $170 million in op lanes funding from the toll roads. And these are this is the portion of the payments that the state has agreed to give the county for high quality transit projects in these areas. So we feel that that's a very reasonable type of assumption. Now, obviously, if there's a timing question, when could we know, when would we know? Certain work can go on and get started. If for instance, we only had the state money at the beginning, we could continue to make progress on certain aspects. For instance, 355, we've divided into two different sort of projects. In the southern and northern part, we're continuing to do design work. That can continue with just state money while we tee up the federal money. If we're not getting the federal money, we can't go to construction until we've solved that. So I think it's a limited risk, but I think it's something that we have to show, because one of the things I discussed yesterday with Councilmember Friedson was we have to show that we're serious. When we're applying to the feds, I think it's important that we show there is this state money that we feel confident that we can bring to these projects. So that's one area where you see some significant increases in outside aid. In terms of some of the other big projects relying on increased state aid are the Restoration Center, which is a project it serves two purposes. It helps divert people from jails who are having mental health and substance abuse issues, who, for lack of an viable alternative, end up either hospitalized or in jail. It would also be available for community services for people who are having those issues. We are assuming 50% state aid for that project. There is a program that exists already that has helped us get funding for Avery Road. This is a higher percentage we're assuming, but again, given how well the state is funded this year, we felt it was not unreasonable. If we don't get some of those commitments in place in a timely way, it could impact the schedule, but we do feel that ultimately this project will be able to rely a significant portion on state aid. Similar project is the Criminal Justice Center, which is replacing the Rockville jail. There is an existing program at the state that we're eligible to get 50% of eligible costs from the state. Traditionally, that program has been funded at a lower level than what we might need. However, when we built the Clarksburg jail, we were able to get more money. So again, it's this fine line. We don't want to be overly aggressive and set ourselves up sort of to fail, but we have to show that we need their money. If it looks like we don't need their money, why would they give it to us? So we do have to put ourselves in a good position to make those asks. And I think these are important projects for a variety of reasons. And I think it's a good approach.
I support all the projects. I like the approach. I just think we should have a strategy that the council and the executive agree upon moving forward. Of what type of what qualifies for the type of project that we assume state aid and federal aid in this way. And I'm not sure we really have a policy or a protocol for how to do it. I don't have a concern really with any of the decisions you've made. I share the executive's enthusiasm for bus rapid transit in particular, and certainly the treatment center and the criminal justice center are critical projects, core government functions that we need to move forward on, and we need aid in order to make those happen. But I do think that we should have a collaborative overarching policy for how to do this. I think that the result was good. I think the process could be fleshed out, frankly, and so I would just ask that we work on that for moving forward as a humble request. Two other quick questions. Could you just quickly explain the difference between the 17-year horizon and the 10-year horizon that change the dynamics of the impact taxes? I just think that's an important point.
Yes, and I also, don't let me forget, I did want to talk about state aid as it relates to schools as well. So on the impact taxes, you may remember when we were looking at the subdivision staging and some of the changes that were likely to impact revenues, we were looking at sort of two sets of data. We were looking at historical revenue estimates and we were looking at pipeline data. And pipeline data allowed us to be able to estimate sort of the amount of the percent with which we would have to reduce our impact tax estimates. We were ending up though using a 17-year basis for determining our sort of base revenues, but only using a 10-year basis for calculating our reductions. We needed to make them both consistent at the 17-year mark. So that adjustment has been made. The net effect was we were overly conservative last year without intending to be, but thankfully that helped us out with some of the cost increases and other issues that we had this year. So that's one reason why those have increased. I did think I should also mention, because a big part of state aid assumptions has to do with the schools. Last year, there were some last minute changes to really increase the school state aid assumption. And frankly, in May, I was very, very nervous about that because the information we were hearing from the state was not real clear. We were getting some vibes that maybe the IAC was not going to honor the intent of the Built to Learn Act, which would have increased the square footage that we were eligible to claim for calculating our state aid. And that would have had a huge difference in terms of what we were able to be able to yield in terms of state aid. It used to be we had to spend the state would give us $1 for every 4 we spent. And for us to leverage all the Built to Learn money, we just couldn't have afforded the local match. The good news is, I think partly out of the work we've been doing on the OLO work group, some of what we've been hearing and with the delegation and with intergovernmental relations is that those policies are being changed. And now we will be able to get the higher square footage. So we have included estimates in our CIP that have done a number of things to try to maximize what we can realize in terms of state aid. It's based on a number of assumptions. At this point, we believe that they are reasonable, but we will have to continue to monitor this. It's a fluid situation. We are trying to make sure we get all of the old traditional aid, as well as leveraging the Built to Learn. Part of doing this is literally increasing the MCPS request to add prevailing wage costs. Unless schools includes prevailing wage costs, they are not eligible for more than 24.99% state aid on a project. So this has been extremely complicated. one of the things that we had done with the additional bonds that the executive recommended, he recommended a net increase of 70 bonds. 58.75 million of those were put in a project specifically. It's almost like a designated set aside for MCPS to help make sure we can leverage the state aid in those out years. I don't want to take up time, but there's been a structural problem with the CIP in how we budget and as it relates to MCPS, and we were attempting to take baby steps to fix that problem with that money.
Well, so I'll start with the latter. I'll go back to the beginning. So I think that those baby steps are positive. So I think we need to continue to do that. And I think we have to work together to sort through all these changes. There's a big change to the way that state funding for schools is happening. And we need to make sure we're reflecting that in the budget and addressing some of the historical challenges that we've had to appreciate the state aid dynamics in the capital budget, which has historically been a challenge. On the 10-year to 17-year piece, I just want to make sure there have been a lot of comments made about the council's decisions historically, previously on the growth and infrastructure policy. And some of them are based on the 10-year versus the 70-year fix that we are, effectively making here. And so I would just, in a friendly and collaborative way, implore you as a colleague to make sure that everybody in the executive branch, including the executive himself, understands what was done here to fix some of the calculations that were at the time discussed and at times disputed, and make sure that everybody is using the correct calculations and the correct data. I understand, what happened, and that's fine. We're fixing it, and I think that's a positive. We shouldn't be afraid to fix mistakes, but we shouldn't be citing numbers and others. So I just wanted to note that, because there have been a lot of very passionate comments, emphatic comments made, and some of them are based on data that we're now fixing. So I just think that we need to make sure we're using the most up-to-date data. Just last question on intergovernmental aid. Could you just explain the decision to include the managed lanes local money? The county executive has been very outspoken about his views on this without getting into the merits for or against the governor's project. It's obviously not an appropriate conversation for this context, but there is a little bit of a disconnect here that I think those who are reviewing this will question of how the county executive on the one hand is opposed to the project and doing what he can to stop it. On the other hand, he's assuming a fairly substantial amount of money in the capital budget to put forward projects that he and we all, I think, support unrelated to that particular project. So could you just explain the decision? Because that was a policy decision. I assume the county executive was involved in that decision. So if you could just confirm that the county executive signed off on that decision to include that and just the thought process behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was sort of going to happen, and this is probably from his perspective, making the best of not his ideal situation, but again, at least having the positive outcome of advancing something that he thinks is important, from an equity perspective, from an economic development perspective, and an environmental perspective. So I think it was a practical decision.
Got it. Okay. I think that's all. Oh, and my last question. There's a reference to inflation in here, and I think that the broad decisions on inflation, seem reasonable to me, and also on recordation taxes, that we don't assume that this recent pop, so to speak, is going to sustain, which I think is the prudent assumption to make, which I appreciate and council staff supports. But just wondering, the large increase in inflation today, over 4%, that is being assumed for the current fiscal year. Could you just quickly explain how we're absorbing that? I mean, normally, in a normal context, if we had 4% inflation from where our inflation was, we would have a savings plan of some sort. We're in better circumstances than we had anticipated in order to absorb those costs, and if you could just quickly explain why.
Well, so I think that the increases in income or impact taxes and recordation taxes helped. To the extent any increases in state aid with schools might have helped offset some local funds. I'm not sure that really happened, but that would have helped also. I will say we intentionally left the somewhat larger set aside in FY23 and 24, recognizing that some of this inflation might be beyond what we are assuming. We did also allow DOT, DGS to do a slight increase in the rates of inflation. I will say, though, that if hyperinflation continues, we haven't solved that problem. I mean, my little modest bump up in the set aside, about 5 million more in each of those years, does not solve massive inflation problems. I will say the schools projects came in with significant cost increases, and we have reflected those and in fact added onto those to reflect the prevailing wage add-ons as well. So, and frankly, the way we did this is we've delayed some projects. People aren't going to be happy about it, but that is sort of what happened. If we get in a really terrible bind where we just don't have any more set aside and we've got contracts coming in, we'll have to do more delays. So hopefully things will start to settle down and hopefully some of our buffers will be in place, but it's something we're going to have to continue to watch. We've reflected it to a certain extent. It just depends how long it goes on and how extreme it is.
Right, and certainly none of us have the crystal ball for that. That's why I have to make the most prudent decisions we can. I appreciate that. I will just, there are a lot of moving parts, and I'll just note that some of the inflation increases are reflected also in the spending increases, like recordation tax increase.
Yes.
People are spending more money on housing, which is driving up the factors that go into what we consider to be inflation and the consumer price index. And so all of these things work together, and because we changed our property tax system, we will benefit from that as well, thanks to voters who overwhelmingly voted for that. So we have to understand the broad context of how all of these moving parts are working. I appreciate the fact that everybody in the executive branch and on the council staff and OLO are thinking through those comprehensively. So I'll yield back. Thank you for indulging me on some of these specific questions. I appreciate my colleagues' patience as always. Thank you.
No, these are very good points. Thank you for bringing them up. I think it was definitely important because in some ways, every time we have these discussions, there are different elements that have that have come up, and so it's good to kind of like get everybody up to date. Okay, Mr. Smith, I would be remiss though if I didn't point out that we do have a 10:30 joint committee session, so I think we should get to the decision points. Mr. Smith.
Very good. And so I'll just do a quick housekeeping because of the conversation. So the committee has recommended staying with the general obligation bonds. That's what I heard, the guidelines that were previously approved. Thanks to Mr. Friedson's questions, we've addressed some of the other items that the council staff raised in terms of the overview of the CIP. I'll just quickly add from council staff's viewpoint, a lot of those conversations will occur at the committee as individual committees review those projects. And that's like what happens every year for the CIP. And then the last item that I'll raise is the committee needs to make a recommendation on the park bonds, because that's also 3 guidelines it sets. I'm joined here by Mr. Morgan, who, and fortunately, the executive has, at least in terms of time, fortunately, the executive recommended the same guidelines as what the council approved. And so that's 8 million a year. What the council adopted in October. And so certainly given the conditions, there's no need to change those. And so council staff recommends retaining those for this set of guidelines for February. And so I'll pause there because that's the committee should make a recommendation whether we need to retain or revise the park bond guidelines.
All right, Mr. Morgan, anything you'd like to add? Oh, you're muted, Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, we were in agreement with the with the guidelines and have a CIP with some great projects planned for spending that money.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, so I think that without objection, we will retain those guidelines as well. Anything else, Mr. Smith?
The last thing to note is the PAYGO, and does not require decisions. So the committee is done with decisions, but I do want to note, since it's in the packet, the executive recommended PAYGO at slightly greater than the 10% policy level for some of the fiscal years due to kind of the way the bonds have shifted during the pandemic. There were some additional bonds that were programmed, but that are going to shift because of delay in projects. And so OMB and the executive have recommended PAYGO to honor those bonds. And so that's great news. Using PAYGO obviously reduces debt service overall. And so council staff doesn't recommend anything different there for now, but did want to note that since others might see, oh, look, there's a lot more PAYGO than what we normally are expecting. And so with that, I don't have anything else. Appreciate your time, and we'll prepare the packet. This will go to the council on Tuesday, February 1st as an action item. It is separate from consent, just as a quick note, because of the conversation. And then the council will adopt the guidelines on February 1st, and the Go Committee recommendation will be in my packet. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, just very quickly on PAYGO, I think it's important to note within the packet, we cut in half PAYGO last year. I voiced my very strong concerns about that and disagreement with that. I won't rehash them here. Prior to that, we have cut PAYGO in savings plans in order to address the fiscal dynamics at the end of the year. And so while we are in a very marginal way doing well on PAYGO today, it doesn't really make up for the historical dynamics. So I just wanted to note that we have more work to do on PAYGO. There are real impacts to those decisions that linger on in a capital budget. And I just wanted to put a marker down for colleagues that, if we should benefit in some ways from being more prudent than the circumstances turn out to be, which I think is very possible at this point, which is a great situation to be in, and why I'm pleased to be moving forward as we are together. I do think looking at PAYGO first, so that we don't encumber, we keep in the spirit of, what this committee and prior councils have tried to do without encumbering future councils, but allow us to move forward on critical projects. PAYGO really is the great opportunity to do that when financial circumstances change, when we don't know what the future will hold. So I just thought it was important to put a marker down on that. I think we'll have opportunities to discuss that in more specifics later, but I just hope that we can all work together and think through PAYGO in particular as a primary option for how we handle what could potentially be better than expected circumstances.
Well said. Okay, so I believe that we've made the decisions, and then it'll go to full council. I want to thank the entire team for all your work. And with that, we are adjourned until 10:30. Take care, everybody.
Monty and Ace are both